Hi, this is Stephen Sashin of InvisibleShoe.com, and on this video we're going to take the pattern that you made from the last video and put that on the sole material to make your huaraches. Okay, so we have our pattern that we cut out of our foot and whatever sole material you're using. Now there's a lot of different things you can use for sole material. Some people are just using carpeting and duct tape. Some people are using old tires. This is some material from Vibram or Vibram, depending on how you like to pronounce it. There's lots of online arguments about that. This is the 4mm cherry material. This is the side that goes against the ground, and it's got just a nice little pattern that gives you some great traction. And on the other side, it looks like it's patterned, but it's actually not. This is just coloration. It's smooth enough to feel really comfortable with just enough ridging to hold your foot in place so that it doesn't slip. It's really great material. It's what we use for our invisible shoe kits and our custom invisible shoes. All you're going to do is pretty obvious. You're going to lay the pattern on the material and trace it out with a pencil. I use an old pencil that has a sort of dull point. If you have a pointy point, it's going to break off anyway. If you've only made one tracing of your foot, you're going to trace the first one and then flip it over to trace your other foot. I have on more than one occasion made tracings of my same foot twice. So it's pretty straightforward. I just line it up so that there's just a little bit of extra room on each side. Hold it in place and just trace around. You can't see this on the video, but the pencil is making a mark that's just barely visible in this light. I know when I move, after I finish tracing, I can't seem to trace and talk at the same time. After I finish tracing and I hold this up in the right light, you can see the mark really, really easily for cutting it out, but it's not something that you need to, it's going to transfer ink to your foot, or anyway. So that one's done. You can't see it. And then I'm going to flip this over to make sure I'm doing my other foot and then make another tracing of the other side. And once I've done that, we're ready to cut things out. Alright, once you've finished tracing the pattern on the sole material, you're ready to cut it out. You can use pretty much any good pair of scissors. And when you cut the material, I found that for some reason using a right-handed pair of scissors, it's easier to cut in a counterclockwise direction than clockwise. It's also easier to see the line. That way you can stay just on the outside of the line as you go around. And you want to use just the back part of the scissors and make little cuts, because you just don't have enough leverage when you get towards the front part of the scissors. So all you're going to do is just work your way slowly around the line until you cut out the entire sole. So I'll cut out the sole and then we'll be back for the next step. Okay, once you've taken your pattern, transfer it to the sole, and cut out the sole, you have to transfer those 3 marks for where the holes are going to go for the lacing. And one way of doing that is actually just putting your foot on the sole and placing the marks directly on here. The other is using the tracing. You can just poke a hole in that front one. Now you'll see I actually made this particular pattern much larger than the tracing, just so that you could see what's going on. And you could just dig that right in there, and then at the level where you have those other marks, just make a mark here and a mark here. Again, you can't see those marks very well on the video, if at all, but they're visible enough for our purposes. And our purposes are to cut the holes. Now, I'm going to use a leather punch. Looks like this. Many people have these in their craft kits, if you've ever done any leather work. And the idea is that you want to use a punch the size of which is just barely smaller than the lacing material you're going to use. I use a 5/32 inch lacing material, so the hole that I'm punching is a 1/8 inch hole, 4/32 of an inch. And you're going to punch directly on the spot that you marked for the toe, and for the spots that you marked for the ankles, you just want to move in about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. It doesn't have to be exact. You just want to sort of get a spot that's in far enough so that when you do the lace, it's not going to be so thin right in here that it could rip through the material. That's not really a problem with this Vibram material. It's really, really sturdy. But again, you're just going to punch that hole towards the front, and what you might need to do for that is double up the material. Actually, sort of do it this way to get all the way in there. And then about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch in from the 2 ankle holes. So I'm going to punch those and be right back. Okay, I've punched the holes. I don't know if you can see them. There's the toe holes and the ankle holes. Quick thing about the hole punching, I really recommend that you use a tool like this, or one of the punches that just looks like a I don't know what you call it, just looks like something you hammer in. And the reason that you want to use a tool and rather than just a knife or a nail is that if the holes that you make have any sort of edges, if they're not really clean, then the lacing material can rip right through them, and you don't want that. Which brings us to the next part, lacing. I mentioned before that I use a 5/32 inch polypropylene nylon lace. I use these in the invisible shoe kits and for the custom-made huaraches. And I use it for a couple of reasons. One is it's really soft, it's really strong, it's really durable, it's water resistant, and it has all these really cool colors. So the next thing we're going to do is show how to prepare the shoes to be laced. And this is about a 6-foot piece of nylon that I use here. That's about what most people need. If you have really small feet, you're going to end up using less, but I recommend cutting about a 6-foot length, and you can, again, always cut down. If you're a really large person, if you have really large feet, then you're going to want to go for something a little longer, maybe 6.5, maybe even 7 feet. So, the first thing I'm going to do is cut off this frayed end right there, and this frayed end right here. And the next thing is I'm just going to take a lighter and melt that down. Be careful you don't burn yourself when you do this. Make it a little pointy too if you can. And do the other end as well. And feed one end through that first hole. It's a combination of pushing and getting the material around it. And give yourself a bunch of room to tie the knot that you're going to have at the bottom of the huarache. Now, a lot of people ask, oh, aren't you going to notice that knot when you're running? Aren't you going to feel that? And the answer is no, not at all. Aside from the fact that you're placing it right between your toes, it ends up being pretty flat, so you just don't notice it. And the knot that I tie is just a simple figure 8 knot. So I don't know if you'll be able to see this really well, but it goes over and under and then back through that hole. And then tighten it and flatten it out a little bit. Tighten it again, and again melt that down so that it stays put. Again, be careful that you don't burn yourself. If that knot eventually causes a problem, if it ends up coming undone, it's not a big deal. Just cut it off and make a new knot. And then pull that tight so that the knot is, this is tricky to see, but basically the string goes in, the knot is on top of the material. Flip it over, and then you're going to thread through the outside edge, and then just pull that through and loop it around. I'll do it this way. Loop it from the front towards the back, and then thread through the inside edge. And similarly, you're going to just make a little loop, and you've got huaraches that are ready to be tied onto your foot and almost ready for you to go out and run. So the next video will show you the different ways of tying to get you out and running in your closest thing to bare feet you can possibly have.